The Volanthi Empire had ruled the Orion sector for 12,000 years. Their warships moved through space like silver needles. Their weapons burned hot enough to crack moons, and their soldiers numbered in the billions. When their scouts first discovered the small blue planet called Earth, they saw nothing but another primitive species ready for conquest. The humans had barely left their own solar system. They had only 20 colonies spread across nearby stars. Their ships were slow and clumsy compared to the elegant Volanthi cruisers. Emperor Kethral IX made the decision in less than one standard rotation. He ordered his fleet to teach these humans their place in the galaxy. He expected surrender within days. He expected to add Earth to his collection of conquered worlds without much effort. He was very wrong. The first attack came without warning. The Volanthi Third Fleet dropped out of hyperspace near the human colony of New Helsinki. There were 8 million humans living on that frozen world. They were miners, farmers, and families who had traveled across the stars seeking new lives. The Volanthi commander gave no demands. He asked for no surrender. His weapons opened fire on the planet's surface, and within 2 hours, nothing lived on New Helsinki. The message reached Earth 3 days later. The governments of humanity gathered in emergency sessions. Some wanted peace at any cost. Some wanted revenge. Admiral Chen Wei stood before the United Earth Council and spoke words that would echo through history. They have killed 8 million of our people without cause or warning. They have shown us exactly what kind of enemy we face. We did not want this war, but we will finish it. The human fleet was small. They had only 300 warships compared to the Volanthi's 10,000. Their technology was considered primitive by galactic standards. But humans had something the Volanthi did not understand. They had spent their entire history fighting wars against themselves. They had mastered the art of violence in ways that peaceful empires could never imagine. The Volanthi expected the humans to hide. They expected them to negotiate or surrender. Instead, the human fleet split into dozens of small groups and vanished into the darkness between stars. For 3 months, nothing happened. The Volanthi commanders grew confident. They believed the humans were too afraid to fight. Then the first Volanthi supply station exploded. It was a remote outpost near the edge of their territory. One moment, it was sending normal reports. The next moment, it was expanding into a cloud of fire and debris. The humans had somehow traveled through hyperspace without being detected. They had placed explosives throughout the station and disappeared before anyone knew they were there. Over the next year, the attacks continued. Fuel depots burned. Communication relays went silent. Transport ships carrying soldiers vanished without distress signals. The humans were everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The Volanthi commanders could not understand how such a primitive species was causing so much damage. What they did not know was that human ships carried a new kind of engine. Human scientists had been working in secret for decades. They had found a way to mask their hyperspace signatures. They could move through the galaxy like ghosts, striking and disappearing before anyone could respond. Emperor Kethral ordered his entire battle fleet to Earth's solar system. He wanted to end this war quickly. He wanted to burn the human homeworld and scatter their species across the stars. The Imperial fleet gathered at the edge of the Sol system, 7,000 warships arranged in perfect formation. Their weapons powered up. Their commanders felt certain of victory. Admiral Chen Wei stood on the bridge of the battleship Unity. She looked at the sensor readings showing the massive enemy fleet. Her officers waited for orders. Some of them believed this was the end. Some of them were afraid. But Chen Wei smiled. "They came to our home," she said quietly. That was their mistake. The battle began at 0400 hours Earth Standard Time. The Volanthi fleet moved forward in their traditional wedge formation. They had conquered 100 species using these exact tactics. Their weapons reached out toward the human defensive line. But the humans were not where they expected. The defensive platforms around Earth were empty shells. The patrol ships were automated decoys. While the Volanti focused all their attention on the Sol system, the human fleet had traveled to a different target entirely. The Volanti homeworld of Kether Prime had never been attacked. It was the heart of their empire. Their most sacred temple stood there. Their emperor lived in a palace that touched the clouds. 12 billion Volanti called it home. And now, 300 human warships dropped out of hyperspace in its orbit. Admiral Chen Wei's voice came through every communication channel in the Volanti Empire. You fired the first shot at New Helsinki. You killed 8 million innocent people. Now you will understand what that means. The human weapons were not elegant. They were not precise. They were brutal and overwhelming. Kinetic projectiles moving at half the speed of light slammed into Volanti orbital defenses. Nuclear weapons detonated in chains across military installations. Human marines launched toward the surface in armored drop pods. Emperor Kethrol received the news while his fleet orbited a nearly empty Earth. His face went pale as reports flooded in. Kether Prime was under attack. The orbital platforms were destroyed. Human soldiers were fighting in the streets of his capital city. "Turn the fleet around," he commanded. "We must save our home." But hyperspace travel was not instant. It would take the Volanti fleet 6 days to return to Kether Prime. 6 days for the humans to do whatever they planned. Admiral Chen Wei did not plan to destroy Kether Prime. She was not a monster. Instead, human forces captured key military installations. They took control of communication centers. They surrounded the Imperial Palace and waited. When Emperor Kethrol's holographic image appeared before Admiral Chen Wei, she was sitting in his own throne room. "You wish to speak with me, Emperor?" Kethrol's eyes burned with hatred. "You have invaded our sacred world. You have committed an act of war against the greatest empire in the galaxy." Chen Wei leaned forward. "You committed an act of war against humanity when you destroyed New Helsinki. We are simply responding. The difference is that we are willing to stop. Are you?" The negotiations lasted 4 days. During that time, human forces held their positions. They did not harm civilians. They did not damage cultural sites. They simply demonstrated that they could have destroyed everything if they wanted to. When the Volanti fleet finally arrived back at Kether Prime, they found something unexpected. Human ships were withdrawing peacefully. The planetary infrastructure was intact. Their emperor was alive and unharmed. But everything had changed. The Treaty of Sol was signed 3 weeks later. The Volanti Empire agreed to pay reparations for New Helsinki. They agreed to respect human territory forever. They agreed to never again attack a human world without declaration of war. More importantly, word spread across the galaxy about what had happened. A small species from an insignificant planet had brought the mighty Volanti Empire to its knees. They had not done it through superior technology. They had not done it through greater numbers. They had done it through intelligence, boldness, and an understanding of warfare that 12,000 years of Volanti history had never produced. Other species began to seek humanity as allies. Trade agreements flooded the offices of Earth's government. Diplomatic missions arrived almost daily. The galaxy had noticed these strange creatures who refused to surrender. Admiral Chen Wei retired to a small house on New Helsinki too, the colony built to honor those who died in the first attack. She spent her days gardening and writing her memoirs. Reporters often asked her about the war. They wanted to know the secret of humanity's victory. Her answer was always the same. The Volanti made the oldest mistake in warfare. They judged us by how we looked and what we had, not by what we were willing to do. They saw our small ships and our young civilization and assumed we would be easy to conquer. They forgot that humans evolved on a planet that tried to kill them every single day. We survived ice ages, plagues, predators, and each other. We are not a peaceful species that learned to fight. We are a fighting species that learned to be peaceful. There is a very important difference. Years later, Volanthi historians studied the Human-Volanthi War in great detail. They tried to understand where their empire had made mistakes. The conclusion they reached was simple but terrifying. The humans had never been afraid. From the very first moment of the conflict, from the ashes of New Helsinki to the capture of Kether Prime, the humans had acted with complete confidence. They had known they could win. They had simply needed to choose how. This realization changed how the Volanthi thought about war forever. They had believed that victory came from superior numbers and technology. Humans showed them that victory came from the willingness to do whatever was necessary. The galaxy eventually learned to see humanity as friends rather than threats. Human traders brought new technologies and ideas to distant worlds. Human doctors helped cure diseases that had plagued species for centuries. Human artists created works that touched souls across 1,000 planets. But everyone remembered the lesson of the war. Humanity preferred peace. They built schools and hospitals instead of weapons. They sent scientists and teachers to new worlds instead of soldiers. They genuinely wanted to help other species grow and prosper. However, if attacked, they would respond with a fury that could shake empires. The monument on New Helsinki, too, was built from black stone that came from Earth. It listed the names of all 8 million people who died in the first attack. At the base of the monument, carved in dozens of languages, were words that every spacefaring species learned to understand. They fired the first shot. We fired the last. Ships passing through that sector often stopped to see the monument. Captains from various species would stand before it and read those words. Some felt admiration for humanity. Some felt fear. All of them understood the message. Humanity did not start wars, but they always ended them. Emperor Kethral lived for another 60 years after signing the treaty. He never attacked another species again. When asked about his legacy by Volanthi scholars, he gave only one piece of advice. Never underestimate a species that has survived itself. If they could endure their own nature for 10,000 years, they can endure anything we throw at them. The stars belonged to many species, but humanity had earned their place among them. They had proved that courage mattered more than size, that determination outweighed technology, and that the species willing to sacrifice everything could never truly be defeated. And across the galaxy, whenever conflict threatened, diplomats would remind warring factions of what happened when the Volanthi Empire chose violence. They fired the first shot. The humans fired the last.